This week's Torah portion is Bahaloscha, and there's a lot here. There's all little different little pieces that are sort of quilted together, like Naso. Naso had that kind of texture to it, where it had like little portions, little pieces that are sort of come together. And so there's a lot we could talk about, but I'm going to focus on prophecy tonight. I'm going to focus on it because several of the stories here, or several of the little pieces, are prophecy related. So the first one is Moshe is overwhelmed. The people have demanded meat, and it's a deep cry for meat, not just they're bored, they want meat. There's some deep thing going on, and Moshe sees the look in their eyes, and he just doesn't know what to do about it. There's something that's happening. There's something that's happening that is different than the other times that the people have complained or rebelled. There's something, he sees something different, and he turns to God and he says, I can't do it. I can't do this. And God, Hashem, agrees with him. And he tells him that what he's going to do is there's going to be 70 elders who are going to help him. Now he's always had elders helping him. They were helping him answer questions. They were a bureaucracy that was set up by his father-in-law, or at least suggested by his father-in-law, Yisro. The easier questions would go to people on the lower end of the bureaucracy, and then it would go higher and higher until you would finally, if you needed to, you could talk directly to Moshe. So he had people that were helping him to some degree, but it seems like they were mostly helping him with disputes and halachic questions. But this is different. This is somehow a sharing in his leadership. This is not simply sharing in his decision making, because again, they were there for advice. They were people he could have talked to before. This is different, and it's going to require that they have what is here is being called ruach. Ruach is spirit. Ruach literally is wind, but ruach in this context means spirit, and it seems to suggest, it seems to be spirit related to prophecy, and that's specifically mentioned in the verse. When they got the spirit, they prophesied and they didn't stop. So this spirit that they have is connected to prophecy. So it's something. There's something different here. We have a rule which is stated in all manner of rabbinic sources, which is that you're not supposed to make halachic decisions using prophecy. Halachic decisions are supposed to be made using your intellect, which is not prophecy.
Yeah.
It's a different way of getting to an answer. We talk about we usually describe it as chokhmah, wisdom. And there's even a Gemara where it says chacham adif minavi, that a chacham is in some ways better than a prophet, because there are certain things that a wise person can see that a prophet cannot see. So there's a Gemara in Yuma which says that, and I've discussed this Gemara many times, and I always forget where these other statements are. One is in Daniel, and I think one's in Yirmiyahu. But it says Moshe said, when he's talking about God, he calls God Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Vahanora. He is the God who is great, who is mighty, and who is awesome. Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Vahanora, which is how we start the Amida, how we start the Shemona Esrei. That's how we reference him, and that's based on a description that Moshe gives to him. But at different points, though, some of those words are left out when God is being described. And I'm pretty sure one's in Yirmiyahu, one's in Daniel. I'm not positive. But it's a Gemara in Yuma which talks about it, where one of them called him Hakel Hagadol Hagibor, but did not use no Ra. And the question was, why didn't he use no Ra? And they answered because of the situation the Jewish people are in. It no longer seems like God's awe is obvious to the other nations. They don't see God's awe. They're not awed by him. They're not frightened by him. And then, so it was Aye Norasecha. Where is your awe? So he doesn't see the awe, so he doesn't use awe when he's characterizing him. And then I think the second one was Daniel, who left out Gibor, just Hakel Hagadol, but he didn't say Gibor, mighty. And again, your enemies are vanquishing your people, or look at the state of your people amongst the enemies. So where is your might? Where is your gvura? Again, it's not visible. We don't see a manifestation of God's gvura in the world. And then it says, until the men of the Great Assembly came along. The men of the Great Assembly came along, and they saw that somehow, even though the Jewish people are so vulnerable and we're so tiny compared to the rest of the world, we continue to survive. And that survival amongst the nations in the vulnerable, tiny circumstances that we occupy is itself an indication of God's gvura, of his power, and even his awe, because something is keeping them back. There's like a sheep surrounded by 70 wolves. And for some reason, these wolves are not finishing the job. So when you see that as a chacham, you notice there's something going on, and then you can extrapolate. And you extrapolate to the fact that God is protecting the people. And now you see what the prophet could not see. You see God's might, and you see God's awe. And Ramosha Shapiro, blessed memory, said that this is one of the major distinctions between a prophet and a chacham. A chacham, a prophet sees. He's a ro'eh, he's a tzofeh. Those are both words for somebody who sees. He sees something, and then he articulates what he sees. Or he hears something, and he articulates what he hears. He doesn't extrapolate. He just tells you, it's a gift to be able to articulate what you see, and that is essentially the gift of an artist. When an artist let's say, is painting, it's not simply the skill of their hands that you are enjoying. It's right. They're sharing a vision. They have a certain vision. They see something and they want to share what they see with you. And it's the same thing with a poet. They're I like to tell the story every time I talk about this, which could be almost every week, with Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams was had a show of photographs, and there was a famous artist, a famous writer, who was at the gallery at the showing, and he marveled at Ansel Adams' photographs. And at one point, he said to him, like, "What kind of camera did you use? Because it's really remarkable." And Ansel, I guess he told him, but he he remembered that conversation. So when that author came out with a new novel, he sent the author a note saying, I really loved your novel. What kind of typewriter did you use when you were doing it? And clearly his point was that it's not about the camera or the typewriter, it's about the vision, what they're sharing. And this is the case with the prophet. He shares what he sees, he or she, they share what they see, they share what they hear, but they have a certain angle, they have a certain vision that you don't have. So they are going to kind of be an intermediary for you. And maybe you'll start to look at what they're pointing at a little bit differently than them. So, but that's not how a chacham works. A chacham doesn't work like that. A chacham extrapolates. They don't see it. They could describe you could via mathematics come or other kind of reasoning, you could come to an understanding of a reality that's completely different from what the world looks like. For instance, the subatomic world, the world of quantum mechanics. That world seems to have all sorts of rules and laws, or it seems to defy all sorts of rules and laws of the more macro world. How do we get to it? We get to it from extrapolations, and then a sort of discovery of rules and laws or deviation from rules and laws. They don't actually see it necessarily when they're first discovering it, but it has to be. They're extrapolating to it, and this happens in all manner of the sciences, where even in archaeology, where somebody has just a little bit of physical evidence, and then they extrapolate. They can decide all manner, right? And they could decide all sorts of facts and features of something just based on a little bit of evidence. That's chokhmah, and they move in two different spheres. So the world of the chacham is the world. These were the advisors he had up until this point. He had chachamim. He had wise people, and I'm assuming since they're in leadership positions, they have street smarts. They have all manner of wisdom, right? But these are people that are using chachma. Now, for some reason, it shifts. And he needs not just people that are using chachma, he needs people that are using nevuah. They have to use prophecy. Why? Why do they need to use prophecy? So I remember when Ramosha Shapiro was talking to us one time about this, chacham adif minavi, that in some ways a chacham is better than a navi because they can extrapolate to things, and the navi can't. So that's why they had to leave out those words, Yirmiyahu and Daniel, that if it's Yirmiyahu, had to leave out those words because they didn't see it. They can't talk about something they don't see, right? And the men of the Great Assembly, those are chachamim, those are wise people. They're using Chachma, so they can extrapolate to God's might and God's awesomeness, um, even though directly you're not seeing it. You're not seeing it in an obvious way. This would be like understanding something from that which is not there, like my museum of things you would expect to find in the Torah but do not. If you're extrapolating from something that's not there, that's going to be chokhmah. That's not going to be nevuah. That's not prophecy. Prophets see things. They see it. They share their vision. They're not. They don't extrapolate. So for some reason, it is not enough for him to have wise men advisors. He needs to have prophets now to help him figure out what to do. So, and the question is why? Again, why? Why does he need prophets at this stage? The end of this is that there were two people who had they didn't answer the call. There were these 70 people that were supposed to come now to Moshe's aid as prophets. They didn't feel, I mean, Rashi says they didn't feel that they were worthy, but they didn't go. But then they had prophecy wherever they were. They didn't have prophecy where the rest of them were gathered. They had prophecy where they were. And that is the story of Eldad and Medad, which is the end of that. And then we had we have the story with Moshe and Miriam and Aaron, where Miriam is, it starts off by saying Miriam was speaking to Aaron about Moshe. It doesn't say exactly what. It does mention a Cushite woman that he married, but it doesn't say what the problem with it was. It doesn't identify who this Cushite woman is. It could be it's Tzipporah. The term Cush is often associated with Ethiopia and Sudan, the area of Ethiopia and Sudan. There were Cushan people. That area is called Cush. So a lot of times when they use the word Cush, it means people from that area. There are times when that in modern Hebrew, when you refer to somebody as a Cushi, you mean they are black. They are black. It seems like that is even one of the explanations of what they're talking about. They're not talking about a new wife of Moshe. They're talking about Tzipporah, who is a Midianite, and apparently she was of dark skin. She was black. And so it could be they're referring to Tzipporah, or it could be they're referring to another wife that he took. There is another place that's called Cush, and that's the Hindu Kushan Mountains, and that's near India and Afghanistan. And that was home to a people that were called the Bactrian people. Bactrian camels apparently come from there. And they were a trading people later on. They came into their own significantly later on. They were trading like the Silk Road kind of thing. They would take stuff from India and China and bring it up along the Euphrates to Turkey. So they are also called Kushan people. It's possible that she's from there, from that area. It's possible she's an Ethiopian or Sudanese woman. This other woman, if there is another woman. Anyway, so they're talking about her. It's not clear what their issue is, but somehow their discussion led to a conversation about prophecy, because they are saying, did Moshe alone speak to God? Did Moshe alone speak to God? We also speak to God. or God speaks to us. We also, God speaks to us. In other words, we're also prophets. For some reason, this matters in their discussion, which is, again, a kind of muted, it's presented in a very muted way to us, so we can only guess at what's going on. We have the help of many commentaries, but they bring that up, and then God corrects them. And he corrects them, and he says that it is true, you all have prophecy, but his is on a completely another level. In fact, it might be another type. It's not just that his level of prophecy is higher than yours. It seems to be almost another type. It could be another type. There are characteristics of Moshe's prophecy that are different. You know how they have that question when you notice a variation in a species? Like, how varied does it have to be before it's considered a different species? You know, like what quality? Like if it has 3 eyes instead of 2 eyes, does that make it a different species? So at some point, the variety, the change, right? Somehow the change is enough that now it's a different type. And it could be that's the case with Moshe. When you look at when the Rambam talks about it, he seems to say that. He says there's everybody else's prophecy, and then there's the prophecy of Moshe. So this moment, which is also about a drama between Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe, and also about speaking ill of another person, about the fallout from what we call Lashon Hara, where she gets leprosy, tzara'at, not leprosy, but she gets tzara'at temporarily. So there's more going on in this thing, but at the heart of it, it moved into a, what?
It's an in-law.
Well,
you don't get along with your sister-in-law. Come on.
Oh, she's sister. Miriam is his sister. Oh, you're talking about the. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. She's talking about his wife. Yeah. So, anyways, it seems like God is responding mostly to their misunderstanding, right, that they think they're a prophet just like him. They're not prophets just like him. He's on a completely another level. One of the qualities that seems to distinguish him from everybody else is his extreme humility. And because of his extreme humility, God, the language he uses is Moshe is very humble, more than any other person on earth. He is the humblest of all people. And then he said, I want you to listen to what God says to Moshe and Aaron, Miriam and Aaron. I want you to listen to me. This is important. What you see, you have a vision, and it's called a mar'eh, a vision. You have vision. But usually when you have a vision, you are dreaming, or in something that is like a dream. You are inactive. Your body's inactive. You are laying out somewhere on the ground. You seem to be unconscious. You're having some kind of experience that might look to somebody who's looking like you're having some kind of dream. If somebody's watching you, and that's how you did, but that's not what happens between. He says that's not like my servant Moshe. He's trusted in my entire house. I speak to him mouth to mouth, peh el peh adaber bo. He doesn't. He sees it. There's no riddles involved. He sees this, what he calls tmunas Hashem, the image of what God is presenting. He sees, why aren't you afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? So there seems, and when you see the scholars talking about the nature of prophecy, what it means to say somebody's a prophet, what their experience might be like. They are gleaning some of the important details from here, from this discussion over here. There's other places as well, but especially Moshe's unique prophecy, it comes from over here. So we have like a couple touch points of prophetic touch points that for some reason it was important to share with us over here. So I remember one time Ramosha Shapiro was going on what we'll call a rant against historians. And part of his rant was that when you're a historian, you're looking for cause and effect. You're trying to find what you believe is a chain of cause and effect that was it would be an explanation for the unfolding of whatever unfolded at a certain time period. So, and at some point, you are guessing. You don't know for absolute fact. Even if the person themselves tells you, you could have it where somebody tells you, the reason I decided to do this was XYZ, but somebody who knows them well would say, that's not the reason. That's what he's telling you. Or he doesn't even know why he's doing it. I'll tell you why he did it. And it'll be, something deeper. There was one guy who wrote a book about the effect of potty training on certain generals. I remember hearing about this book where I forgot what war he was talking about, but there was a war that happened or decisions made within a war that led to the death of thousands of people. And when you read about the run up to that decision, it becomes clear that this was like a personal agenda of one of the generals or a fight between two generals. And the end result is thousands of people dying. And this guy wanted to say, like, their personalities, this aspect of their personalities can be traced back to their potty training. That's what he wanted to claim. Anyway, so Ramosha is like, you take this guy's word for it. He's got access to a lot of data, but at one point he has to tell you the chain of cause and effect and what is really the reason that such and such happened. Why did this actually happen? And then he'll present his thing to you, and then you just swallow it like it's fact. Clearly he had read all the histories we had read, but he was just trying to get us to loosen up and not hold on to the explanations as if they're the word of God, as opposed to if a prophet told you what the reason why something happened. So for instance, when we read books of Navi, when we read the books of the prophets, there you have a prophet telling you why things happened. When a prophet's telling you why things happened, that's why things happened, or at least one of the reasons why the thing happens. That is an area that is reserved for prophets that Chachamim do not enter. So one of the things he said was, if you hear somebody tell you why they think the Holocaust happened, right? Nobody knows why the Holocaust happened. And if it doesn't matter how smart the person is, how wise the person is, they don't have access to that information. The only one, he suggested, that has access to that kind of information is a prophet. This, for some reason, the internal workings of our systems are ultimately the purview of prophets. Now, having said that, you could have wise people like physicists that are explaining to you laws of the universe, etc., which also could explain to you, perhaps, why something happened using, like for instance, when Richard Feynman was suggesting that it was a defective O-ring that was responsible for the Challenger exploding upon entry. And then he demonstrated at I think it was a Senate hearing, by putting one of those O-rings in ice water. And he showed how it failed in the ice water. So at a certain cold temperature, it's subject to failure. So he was saying that the reason that thing blew up is because of this, because of that O-ring. Now, so there are times when wise people, it seems like wise people can give you explanations for why something happened.
It might not have been the actual.
Right. But here, so obviously here, we're talking about something different. When it comes to explaining something like why the Holocaust happened, that he is saying for some reason is not going to be in the realm of wisdom, that it's not available for extrapolation. Now, if you're saying it's not available for wisdom, what you're saying is there are elements that are involved in this that are not visible to the naked eye, and they're not visible to the eye of a wise person. They're just not, they would not be known. There's things that go on in the universe. There are things that go on in the heart of men that only the shadow knows. What lurks in the hearts of men. But there are certain things that go on in our lives. There are certain things that happen in the dynamic of our community, of our nation, of the entire world. There are aspects of the universe that we're very much involved with, but they are not available to the realm of the wise. You cannot get to them with just wisdom. There is another faculty that has to be activated in order to see them. When you read the writings of sages that are trying to elaborate on what it is to be a navi, to be a prophet, so they make the point, first of all, that prophecy was available to many people. There were many people who achieved prophecy. The Gemara says there were over 1 million prophets. There were many people that were available to prophecy.
Where are they now?
Right. So, and if you look, even if you read Nach, if you're reading Nach, you every once in a while you get a glimpse, like a little peek behind the veil. You have that in the book of Shmuel when David is running away from Saul, and Shmuel and his disciples protect him using prophecy. You have a lot of data in the lives in the book of Kings, where it talks about the lives of Eliyahu and Elisha, where they do a lot of miracles and there's a lot of prophecy stuff going on. One of the things you see is that there were schools of prophets, that there would be somebody who was a recognized prophet, and that others who aspired to prophecy would apprentice themselves to this navi. They would become his disciple, his prophet, and the prophet would become, this guy would become the prophet's disciple. And the hope was that they would be mentored into being prophets themselves. In the early part of the book of Shmuel, Aryeh Kaplan says this is what's going on with Eli and Shmuel. When Shmuel has his first prophecy, at first he hears somebody calling his name, and he goes to Eli and he says, "Did you call my name?" And Eli said, "No, go back." He was lying down. And then he went back, he heard it again, came back, and he said, "Did you call me?" He said, "No." He said, "The next time you hear your name called, just say, 'Here I am.' And then you tell me what you saw." So Aryeh Kaplan said he's mentoring him. He's mentoring him on how to be a prophet. And, just because you have a deep experience doesn't mean that's prophecy. That's part of the work of studying prophecy, which is learning how to distinguish between what is really true prophecy and what isn't. And because, for instance, at one point, we're told from rabbinic sources that the era of prophecy ended, and there aren't any more prophets. There will be in the time of Mashiach, but there aren't any more prophets. That ended around the time of the Men of the Great Assembly. That ends around 350 before the Common Era. From that time on, the Jewish tradition was there are not prophets anymore. But that doesn't mean people couldn't have dreams or other kind of spiritual experiences where they gained or gleaned information from what we'll call non-material sources. It does seem like there are other available ways to get information, but that and to communicate beyond what is observable to human beings, but that's not called prophecy. Prophecy was a unique point of connection between God and this person, and it had its place and its own sort of quality to it. So somehow, this is what he needs when he's leading the people going forward, and this is going to be with him from this time. It looks like this time that we're talking about over here is, it's because it's like a year and a half into their time in the desert. So the rest of the time in the desert, for like 38 and a half years, he's got these other guys who are functioning as prophets with him. They're part of his entourage, but they're also functioning as prophets. And that is apparently necessary, he feels, in order for him to fulfill his mission. Which suggests that there are, even in the decision making that we see him use, that there are elements that are open to reason and available to us who are not prophets, but there also would be certain things that we're not seeing that these other people are seeing, that these prophets are seeing. They're working with information that we don't have, that wouldn't be available even to the smartest of us. And that, for some reason, is absolutely necessary to go forward. He can't go forward. He can't do what he's supposed to do without the help that they're going to provide him, which means we have to assume that they are going to be seeing things, and they are going to then, as leadership, have to take what they saw into consideration. Now, in that story of Eldad and Medad, it doesn't say what they said. It just said they prophesied in the camp. But there's a reaction from Yoshua, a very strong reaction. He wants them to either be imprisoned or killed. It's not clear based on what the translation. It depends on your translation of that word, kla'im. Does he want them imprisoned or does he want them killed? There's something that he's responding to. And so if you look in Rashi, he quotes a medrash, and the medrash says that they prophesied that Moshe is going to die and Yoshua is going to lead the people into the land. And that's why Yoshua is responding so sharply to them. But this would be an example of something that they would see that other people are not. That, in other words, if you're looking for just a peek at what a prophet would see that would be used in leadership decisions as opposed to a chacham, they are. That would be like an example of information. They have access to that information, whereas a chacham would not. They see the future. They also see what we might call spiritual essence. or they can look into a person and see things about the person and tell a person things about themselves that would not be available to other experts, because they're in touch with this aspect of the universe which doesn't work by the same. So you have the macro universe, you have the subatomic universe, and then we'll have the prophetic universe. And so it works by different rules. It has different laws, but it's still there, and it's still absolutely important if we're trying to understand the world that we live in. People are attracted to Kabbalah, are essentially attracted to that. They want to understand that world. They are not achieving prophecy, so they can't see it, but they're trying to gather as much information as you can about that world without actually being prophets themselves. Those little snippets and kernels that are available through Kabbalah study are of this realm. They are the things of this realm. In fact, Aryeh Kaplan suggests that Kabbalah is the prophetic schools going underground. At some point, when it says the prophecy ended, he explains it didn't just end. The rabbis started to forbid the teaching of prophecy publicly because they were concerned that a lot of people were just getting turned into idolatry through their studies of it, because they weren't putting in the work and weren't in order to get to it. So according to him, what happened was they forbade the public teaching of prophecy. So the people who were in the prophetic schools went underground, and the teachings of that underground movement are the teachings of Kabbalah. Even now, it would just be snippets of what these people were getting, but there are some texts, some very old texts that Aryeh Kaplan usually has a book called Meditation in Kabbalah, where he develops this thesis, and he has examples from ancient texts, etc. So that's it. Just a word about prophecy. And I'll share with you. Yeah.
Prophecy would be hard to teach.
Yeah.
It should have to come naturally.
Right. But there are people who can mentor people on what you might call more intuitive things, like Eli is doing with Shmuel. He can't make him have prophecy, but when Shmuel's talking to him about the experience, he can now tell him if it's prophecy, if it's not prophecy. He also can help him if he's frightened, if he's not frightened. He could tell him what things you have to let go of, what things you just need to let go and ignore, what things, but only once they're in the realm where they both have it. This would be like a golf instructor. Why do these great golfers still have people helping them with their swing, or etc.? Now, it comes to a certain point where they're speaking about things that you have to be there to know what they're talking about, but they can still say something. They could still talk about it. So it would be that kind of thing. Rav Kook said that essentially there were two great epics when it comes to the Torah. There's the epic of prophecy, and there's the epic of the rabbinic epic. That once the epic of prophecy ends, the rabbinic epic takes over. It's the same Torah, and it's just two different vantage points, two different ways of experiencing the same Torah. There's the prophetic way, and then there's the way of the scholar, of the Chacham. And so at some point it becomes the way of the scholar, not the way of the prophet. All righty.